So, as I said, the ones that we've just looked at in the previous video were the varieties that I grafted a year and a half ago. That's not right, 2.5 years ago. A year and a half ago, I did some extra grafting, and only half a dozen, whereas there was probably 15 or 16 varieties that I grafted in the first year. In the second year, I only did about half a dozen, and then I planted them out here about 4 months ago. So these are the varieties. We've got Yarlington Mill here. I tried to graft a Yarlington Mill last year, or in the first year of grafting, but that was one of the few grafts that actually failed. So the year after I grafted that, and now it had a year in the garden bed, and then it's been transferred out here probably 3 months ago. It's coming along pretty well. And this is Yates, another American eating variety. It can also be used in cider. So this, if you can see this ditch that runs here along the edge and disappears into the tree line over there, this is the old creek bed. There was a braided stream. I imagine it was a braided creek running through here a long time ago, and then to drain the area, they dug a channel right through the valley, which is where the creek is at the moment. In the winter, when we get a lot of rain, it breaks its banks just over there, over the other side of the rest of the orchard, and it runs along the old creek bed through here and down here. So pretty rarely do you ever get the water coming up over these trees. It did the first year after I planted them, but it wasn't moving very quickly. However, on the other side of the drive, that gets a lot of water going across it, and I really didn't want to plant any trees over there, mainly because I thought if we get a decent flood after putting those in, the sheet wash over top of the soil will just suck the trees out of the ground, and I'll lose everything that I've planted. So I wasn't going to, but obviously I've run out of room on this side of the ditch, so I had to put them somewhere. So I've put them over here as on a larger grid at Dad's repeated request. And they're sort of in a little bit haphazard because I hadn't really planned this out as well as I did the other orchard, or the other part of the orchard. So this is well, I took a cutting off a tree in town that I suspect is Lady William, which is an old Australian eating variety that it's a good keeper. In town, only about 200 meters from the Southern Ocean, this holds apples on the tree until early August, which is past midwinter in Australia. So there's no leaves left on the tree, but there's still probably 2 dozen fruit on this tree in town that I took the cutting off. It's quite a spectacular sight when you see it. So I'm keeping that for. I'm not even sure whether it does. If it's ever been used for cider, or it's been renowned for cider, but at least for an eating variety, I like to have it because I also kept a couple of the fruit around at room temperature until October, and I was still able to eat them. So if you're going to have apples, you may as well have some keepers to try and keep you through the season, so you don't have to keep buying them if possible. This is Eggleton Styre. No, Fenouillet Gris. Yep, Fenouillet Gris. A French eating variety. It's supposed to taste a little like cloves. Ugly looking fruit though, apparently. This is another, so I did a bunch of cuttings of trees around town that I like. This is actually from I live in town. My parents live out here near the orchard. I actually live in town, and the house that we built had a very old apple tree in the backyard with no name. I'm pretty sure it's a Gravenstein, and this is a cutting taken from that, so I'm pretty sure that's Gravenstein. And this, I think this is the Eggleton Styre. Can't see the label down there. I'll have to have a dig around in a second. And the last, this is, so when I bought the first lot of rootstock, this was this rootstock was too thick for me to properly to do a whip and tongue graft. So I tried a cleft graft, and I think it might have been the Yarlington Mill, and it failed. I think that I got some chooks. I think they knocked the scion, so it wasn't in line, or it failed anyway. The rootstock stayed alive. So last year I tried to do a bud graft, and that failed as well. So I planted this out here because the rootstock itself was actually getting too big for the bit of garden bed that I had it in. So I'm going to let those shoots grow up, and I'll probably graft over those in another 6 months when they're hardened off for winter. And so the lot over here, these 3 lines are stone fruit rootstock that I haven't bud grafted yet. And the last 4 this line are pears. I found a group of pears. Oh, sorry, a group of pears. I found a tree north between Portland and Haywood that I really like the fruit off, and I've been picking it in the last couple of years for fermenting. It's not really a great eater, but it's a really complex, slightly sour and tannic fruit. So I think it'd be a really good fermenting fruit. Problem is, there's not too many. I think it's got really poor pollination, because I never get that many fruit off it. So I noticed when I was picking last year that there was these 3 or 4 pear trees growing in and around it, and I thought they were actually growing from seed. But I went up there and dug them out, because it's a decent sized tree. It's a fruiting tree, and pears, when they're fruiting, are generally enormous. But this tree is only probably about 4 or 5 meters high, and you can climb it fairly easy. It's a nice sized tree. So they'll make good rootstock if they follow their parent. Bigger than the apple trees, but still a nice size, particularly for this area, because if we can get, they'll be hardy. But when I went to dig them up, I realized that they actually weren't grown from seed. They were suckers, growing off the roots of the parent tree, which is good because it means they're clones. So they actually will grow to the same size. But the problem was they didn't have a great root system themselves, because they were mostly living off the parent tree's rootstock. They're living off the parent tree's root system. So I dug them up, and I planted them out here, and they're still alive. There's a couple of them are not. It doesn't look great. It looks a little dehydrated, and this it has been. It was on the piss a bit when it went in, and I couldn't get it straightened. So it's So you can see it's a little bit, some of them look a little bit dehydrated. 3 of them look fairly dehydrated, as if the roots aren't supplying quite enough water to the top of the tree. So I'm not sure whether they probably will survive, but I was a bit worried about them a month ago because they were looking a little bit like they were going to cark it. So I'm not sure what I've probably got. There's a bunch of old pear trees around town that don't really seem to be good eating trees. So I'm wondering whether they actually are perry trees. I'm probably going to go around and get cuttings and graft them onto these over the years, but at the moment we'll just see how they grow. But I'll keep at least 1, maybe 2 of these as the original variety from the roadside, so that I can get a lot more fruit of that type, to have sort of a local variety of pear that can be used to produce fruit, produce a fermented product. I'm not sure whether you'd call it perry just yet, or whether it'd be pear cider. Tom Oliver seems to have some things to say about that. And that's about it. You can see the other end of the orchard from this direction. So that's all the varieties that I got so far. There's a couple that are still in the garden bed at home that didn't make it out here just yet. There's a little bit of room for them, but that's pretty much all I'm going to be planting for a little while. I'll be just concentrating on tending the fruit. And in later videos I'll probably go through and talk about some of the problems that I've had with a few of them, what concerns me, and how I'm going to, as we went through, you could probably see some problems with some of the structure of the trees that are growing, particularly over the other side where they've had an extra growing season. And I'll go through and talk a little bit more about the how I think I'll go about correcting them. Anyway, so that's the orchard so far, and I hope you've found it informative. I'm just trying to get a bit more information out there so people can see the varieties that I've got and how they're growing and the problems that I'm having, and hopefully you'll find it interesting. Cool. Bye.